This is Beryl Guts, one of the 7 masters who took part in the world-ending Holy Grail War in FGO, and to me, he's the most despicable human in this entire series. Well, I guess right after the Matto family. If you know me, then you already know I can't stand this guy. Like seriously, he's an a-hole through and through. Even Mash, who's usually the sweetest and most forgiving person, straight up hates him. And if you know their history, you'll get why. If you don't, trust me, there's a solid reason for it. Now, if you're still impressed by his neat and dandy look, let me explain in the most casual way possible so you can really understand how horrible this guy is. Basically, he once broke into an underage girl's room when she was alone. He did something that made her feel so uncomfortable that even years later, just being reminded of him makes her sick. She had to be rescued by her parental figure, and he basically got slapped with a restraining order so he couldn't go near her ever again. There. The worst part is that he claimed that was the happiest day of his life. Now, you can feel a little relieved because it wasn't SA, but that doesn't really make it any better. That's horrible, isn't it? That's exactly the kind of person Beryl Guts is. And that was just one of his acts, by the way. He's truly messed up. But despite this kind of behavior, Beryl actually has a hidden side, a side no one has ever seen, or one he never shows. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Last week I made a video like this. There are 7 masters in Chaldea, and I've already covered 4 of them in my previous video. So if you want the full story, go check that one out first. You can click the link in the corner or just browse my channel page. Anyway, back to the topic. What kind of hidden side could a twisted guy like Beryl possibly have? Well, the answer is simple. It's the feeling of love. You see, love is something every living being feels. But why is this considered a hidden side of Beryl? Well, because he's always shown as a guy who chases pleasure. Not the rich lifestyle kind of pleasure, not even the lustful kind. His idea of pleasure comes from the thrill of killing. He doesn't care who he has to be or what he has to do, as long as he gets that chilling satisfaction. He basically interprets his feel-good emotions through murder. You could compare him to Hisoka from Hunter x Hunter, but Beryl is way more fixated on just the killing part. He never once had the intention of making the world better, not even close, and that's clear in everything he does from start to finish. Sure, sometimes he shows a soft spot to people he sees as weaker than him. From the outside, it might look like a big brother giving advice to a little brother, but in reality, it's just his ego. He feels powerful when standing over someone weaker, which is why he got close with Kadok, someone he considered weak. But that's not love. However, it's revealed that he actually did have this feeling. He genuinely didn't want to kill someone he loved, and that woman was Mash. Yes, his sense of love was still twisted, but he really did love her. Now the question in your head should be, what made Mash different from all the other women, right? See, Beryl was a sadistic person. He loved seeing people in pain because that gave him satisfaction. But Mash was like the epitome of ultimate blankness, something pure and untouched within Chaldea. For a sadist like him, the thought of seeing Mash's empty, expressionless face finally change because of some extreme emotion, that was the most entertaining thing imaginable. That's why he liked Mash. I imagine he wanted to witness that very first moment when her blankness cracked. He loved that pure emptiness in her soul and wanted to see it get tainted. That's why Pepe once made a remark during the India chapter. When he saw Mash slowly growing into a real emotional person, he thought, that's nice for her. But at the same time realized Beryl would hate this new Mash. Because Mash, who had now gone through experiences and emotions, was no longer that pure, untouched white he adored. And that's also why he once broke Mash's fingers, one by one, just to make her cry in fear back when she was still a kid in Chaldea. Yeah, that's the part I mentioned earlier. He wanted to see that pure white get tainted. But even with all that, he never wanted Mash to die. He even stopped the director from using the suicide command spell, Serious Light, on her because he didn't want her death. At least, not like that. Now I can't really say for sure that Beryl's feelings for Mash were genuine love. You see, love is such a heavy word with so many meanings. But at the very least, he didn't want Mash to die, and he genuinely wanted to see her again after the coma. His whole reason for coming back to life was just to meet her. And despite Pepe saying that Beryl probably wouldn't like the current Mash, he still confessed in his own way, saying how beautiful her eyes were, and that he wanted to protect her. So I guess you could say, it's implied that the love Beryl talked about was actually real. Now, of course, there's a big chance he would have ended up torturing Mash in the name of that love. But since he died before his wish came true, we'll never know. Maybe it would have gone that way. Or maybe, just maybe, he actually wanted a normal life with her. Honestly, who knows? Next up, Kirshtaria Wodaim. I already talked a bit about him back in part 1. Basically, he comes off as this arrogant, super charismatic guy who only cares about strength. Your typical noble mage trope. But the truth is, he's actually a humble dude, kinda dorky even, who just looks charismatic. Like I said before, he can literally crack dad jokes in front of his friends. And even Pepe mentioned that back in Chaldea, Kirsch was someone who laughed a lot. That's a huge contrast from his serious, intimidating appearance. So, why am I bringing him up again? Because I think there's still more to dig into about this man, his hidden side that most people don't know. And yeah, I'm just gonna say it. This guy loves baking bread. Like, can you even imagine someone with that much presence kneading dough in a kitchen and actually enjoying it? Honestly, I think that's really sweet. Thing is, he actually has a history with bread. If you know the full story, you probably won't be surprised. But for those who don't, when Kirsch was still a teenager, he was gravely injured by an origin bullet. At that point, a homeless kid saved him, helped him hide, and forced him to eat something. And that something was bread. It was just some stolen bread, but for Kirsch, in that moment, it was the most precious thing he had ever eaten. The actions of that homeless kid motivated him so much. That single moment pushed him to want to become a better person, someone who not only looks toward the future, but also looks around him and behind him, at the many things that are often forgotten or taken for granted, while supporting humanity in reaching its highest potential. So when you think about his little bread baking hobby, every time he bakes, it's like he's remembering that homeless kid who saved him. And by remembering, he's also constantly reminding himself of his motivation to be a better person. And honestly, that's just so wholesome. Alright, so by now we already know that even though he looks super intimidating, deep down he's actually a cheerful, caring guy, with a pretty adorable hobby on top of that. But here's another hidden side of him. He sucks at technology. I mean, it's kinda normal for mages to not be great with tech since their fundamentals are totally different, even though there are a few who can handle both. That's also why Chaldea has a bunch of non-mage engineers to deal with all the tech stuff. And well, Kirsch definitely falls into the not tech-savvy category. Like, he knows tech, but not in any deep way. Now, this part isn't outright confirmed, but it's implied through his computer password. You see, his password for his computer was literally just the initials of his teammates' names. Super simple, super easy to crack, especially for someone in a high-ranking position like him in Olympus. Like, he's literally standing on equal footing with Zeus, but his password was just this. The funny part is that K-Doc only needed 3 tries to figure it out. His first guess was just Crypter. The second was a miss with Pepe's name. He wrote Scandinavia instead. And the third try hit the jackpot. Despite that being the implication of Kirsch's level when it comes to making tech-based passwords, honestly, it's kinda cute. It shows how much he actually cherished his teammates. Now, since this is only an implication, it opens the door for another theory. The guy's holding tons of classified info but uses a super lousy password. It kinda makes me wonder, what if he actually did it on purpose to leak info? I mean, we only call it an easy password because we already know all the Crypters' names, right? So maybe he set it up that way from the start, as a loophole to pass info to one of the Crypters without technically breaking his contract. This also makes sense because the only person who would know Kirsch used that kind of password would have to already understand his thought process, meaning it'd have to be someone close to him, either another Crypter or us, the Chaldea crew, or at least one of the old members like Da Vinci or MASH. That's definitely a possibility. And yeah, even if he can be a little weird sometimes, at the end of the day, he's still Kirshtaria, one of the genius mages. And the last one is Daybit Sem Void. There's just so much mystery around this guy. At first glance, he looks like your typical silent, high IQ character, but he's not really the quiet type. He comes off as cold, angry, and calculating, but he's not actually like that either. He's not angry, he's actually supportive in his own way. It's more like he doesn't talk much simply because nothing around him feels interesting enough, but even that's not quite it. Honestly, I'd say Daybit is like the ideal example of a silent character, the embodiment of neutrality itself. Usually when we think of someone neutral, we imagine a passive observer, someone who doesn't take much action, right? That's how neutrality is often portrayed. But Daybit is kinda different. He moves freely, reaching out wherever he wants, while still keeping that neutral stance. Maybe it's because he has a mission, a big goal pushing him forward. That's why he can act good when he needs to, and bad when he needs to. Step by step, his actions show that. Throughout his journey, he stays neutral, but that neutrality means he'll do anything, regardless of human rules or even the rules of the world itself. His goal isn't bad, it's just something beyond what we can understand with our limited perspective. So for people who don't know the context or his true intentions, Daybit looks like someone who's constantly moving, helping here, destroying there. His way of thinking is already beyond human logic. He doesn't see things strictly from a human standpoint anymore. Well, he does still consider it, but his view is way bigger. Not just the bigger picture, the biggest picture. That's what makes him so hard to understand. In simple terms, you could sum up Daybit as someone who only acts when necessary. He'll speak if he needs to, give advice if he needs to, do good if he needs to, and do evil if he needs to. But beyond all that, there's still something about Daybit that goes outside even the words "when necessary." Something unexpected, especially from someone like him. I'll just start with the first hidden side of Daybit. Turns out, he actually has a pretty specific sense of fashion and style. Now, most people would probably think someone like Daybit doesn't care about fashion at all, right? Like, he seems like the type who wouldn't bother with stuff like that since it's not exactly a crucial thing for someone like him. But that's not really the case. Take his hair, for example. You'd think he'd just slick it all back for efficiency, tie it up in a ponytail, or just cut it short so it's easy to manage. But no, Daybit actually chooses to style his hair that way. He literally wakes up with straight hair, which looks totally different from his usual style, and then he goes out of his way to make it look like his normal hair again. Kinda shocking to realize this guy actually has a preferred hairstyle. This was shown in the concept art by his artist on X. Pretty interesting, right? And it's not just the hair. His outfits are definitely chosen by him too. That's where it gets more fascinating, because his entire fashion sense seems to tie back into his theme: darkness. Think about it. Everything about Daybit is connected to dark vibes. His last name is Void. He's basically described as a void in reality. His eyes are this deep purple shade. He's contracted with Tezcatlipoca, the god whose whole deal is darkness in FGO. He reached out to beings from a dark star after the artifact activated. He summons alien shadows, and even his original self was turned into a blast of shadow. And of course, his outfits are all dark-colored. Now, maybe he only picked dark clothes out of convenience, like he just doesn't care about brighter colors. But still, the fact that it all lines up so perfectly with his whole darkness theme makes it super interesting to think about. The second thing is, Daybit actually seems kinda into sports. Now, we don't know if he's into all sports, but at least we know he knows about soccer. You guys remember, right? For some reason, Daybit literally memorized the entire rule set of proper human history soccer and then decided to teach it to the Danos so they could use it in Xoker. That's both super weird and kinda wholesome at the same time. I mean, yeah, the Danos were super rough when they first started playing Xoker, and a lot of them got injured. So maybe Daybit taught them soccer rules to reduce the number of casualties. But honestly, it feels less than that. It's like he just wanted to see soccer being played by a bunch of dinosaurs. Now, of course, looking at the bigger picture in the story, we can say that it's probably because he wanted the Osalome to harvest their hearts more efficiently for ORT's resurrection. I mean, this is Daybit that we're talking about. But still, the fact that Daybit went out of his way to recreate soccer in detail and willingly spent time teaching it is actually pretty cool. He didn't need to go that far. Just making sure the Danos didn't kill each other would have been enough. But instead, he made a whole system out of it. So yeah, those are probably the weirdest sides of Daybit. Stuff you'd never notice unless you really look into it. I didn't even realize how strange yet kinda sweet it was that he actually took the time to teach them a game until I went back and reread it. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm planning to make individual videos about these characters later, especially the ones that still have a lot worth digging into. But that's for another time. For now, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.